Welcome into Locked On Horned Frogs. It's another week. It's Monday. Last season, during the offseason, I said I was really excited about the TCU corners. I thought they could be the leaders of that defense. I was wrong about that, but I'm excited about that position group again. I'll tell you why next. This is Locked On Horned Frogs.
You are Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily podcast on the TCU Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Locked On Horned Frogs, your daily TCU podcast. I'm Steven Simcox, your host. Last offseason, before the season started, I was working through the different position groups on the team, and I was really excited on the defensive side of the football about the TCU corners. I said, man, this group is going to be really good. Travius Hodges-Tomlinson was a guy that had emerged in 2020. Noah Daniels had a good season. Kean Stewart. There were a few other players like C.J. Caesar. I know some of you might have just ducked when you heard that name. But I thought those guys would provide some good depth. It didn't happen. It didn't come together. But I'm excited about this group again this season. And I know it's always great to start a show by saying I was wrong, but I'll tell you why. One, even though the position group as a whole struggled, and really, I mean, the whole defense struggled last season. So it was hard to find bright spots, even within the defense because there were so many struggles. But Travius Hodges-Tomlinson had a really good season. Again, he's been as close as I think, they've had to a lockdown corner in a while. And so he's coming back another year. Kean Stewart, Noah Daniels are guys that have a lot of experience. And Noah Daniels is a really interesting player. I mean, I remember last year before the season, he got interviewed by Pro Football Focus, which stood out, one, because you just don't see TCU players talk much in the media besides the availability that they get after practice or after games. But Pro Football Focus was talking to Noah and talking about him like he could potentially be a day one or day two NFL draft pick. And, I mean, you see the speed, you see the athleticism, the ability, the potential there. It just hasn't really come together. And last year he didn't see the field a whole lot. And we never got a great explanation as to why that was. I don't know if it was injury. I don't know if something was going on behind the scenes. But he didn't play a lot. And it doesn't really feel like he's necessarily the starter. But I think him and Kean Stewart are both guys that have played a lot of football, that know, what they're doing, and that have the ability to sub in and out and make plays. And then there's a transfer, and this is a transfer that I personally forgot about. And, it's interesting. Like, you look at, you go through the offseason, and they sort of pick up these guys as the offseason progresses. And you think, oh, well, they use the portal pretty effectively. But then you look at the actual list, and you say, man, they added a lot of players in the transfer portal, they being TCU. And Josh Newton was one of those guys. He's a corner from Louisiana Monroe. And you look at the stats, I mean, they're not necessarily eye-popping. He had 2 interceptions last year, 3 interceptions in his career, but he's a big physical corner. 6 feet tall, weighs around 190. At least that's what they got him listed at. I don't know what kind of beef he put on in the offseason. And he's been getting starting reps in camp, and he's one of those guys that the coaching staff has talked about and has been excited about and said, hey, this is a dude that should have been playing Power 5 football. He can play at this level. He can be effective at this level. And so if you have 4 legitimate corners, and Tomlinson, Newton, Stewart, and Daniels, and you have that ability to sub in and out, that could be a really effective group. And the other thing is, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. But the corners were asked to do so much under Coach Patterson. They were out on an island a lot of the time. Sorry for the baby clothes in the background. We got a new kid coming September 8th, so we're trying to organize this room. Anyway, but there was so much pressure on corners in Coach Patterson's defense because they were on an island most of the time. matched up one-on-one on the outside, and you just had to make plays. I mean, you had to find a way to shut down your guy, and you're probably going to give up some big plays just given the amount of opportunities that there was one-on-one coverage. So things will be things will be different in Joe Gillespie's defense. But I really like the potential of this group. And shifting gears somewhat, another player that's a newcomer. I was talking about Josh Newton. Another player that's a newcomer. Now, this is a true freshman, 17 years old. Damonic Williams comes from Mission Hills, California. 6'2", 325. And I said when Joe Gillespie got the job, I said, one area of this defense is going to be really interesting to see how they sort of figure it out is nose tackle, because they don't have guys on the roster who really fit that traditional nose tackle body type. And Williams came in, and if you listen to the reporting that Jeremy Clark has done from 247 Horned Frog Blitz, he said that's a guy that, like, the staff, they were up till 2, 3 in the morning the day before signing day because he was committed to Cal. And everybody thought that was a slam dunk, and they just worked, and worked, and they got him here. And he had a good spring. And in the fall, there were some murmurs about him. I was like, hey, he's right there. He's running with the twos. And now, as of like late last week, he's getting starting reps. And Sonny Dykes said, he said this in a press conference at some point last week. It doesn't always matter who's at the one, who's running with the ones. Obviously, it does a quarterback, but there's a lot of positions on the field where they're going to be rotating people in and out, and they kind of want a 30-man rotation. But still, I mean, it matters in that one. Sonny Misi was there. He was the guy, and then Williams is now taking over and supplanting him as a starter, and they wouldn't have a depth chart if it didn't matter. Okay? That's kind of the bottom line. Now, is it a little concerning to me that you're going to have a freshly, 18-year-old young man going up against grown Big 12 offensive linemen? Yeah. But if he's your best player, he's your best player. And he spoke to the media today. And you look at him, you're like, man, he's impressive. Like, he looks like a big-time defensive lineman. I'm just excited about his development. And I hope that all the experience he's supposedly going to get in year one is a big benefit to him. But those two newcomers, Josh Newton and Damonic Williams, big keys for this year's defense. Coming up, I put a poll out, and I wanted to see who our listeners thought, our listeners and our viewers thought would be QB1 for the Colorado game. I got the results, and I have some comments from some of you. That's coming up next on Locked On Horned Frogs. It is Locked On Horned Frogs. It's Monday. Just a few housekeeping things. So you can get Locked On Horned Frogs wherever you get your podcast. You can also find us on YouTube. Here's the thing about YouTube. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with it. Our company is really pushing YouTube. We've had hosts that have been very successful with it. I come from an audio background. As you see my face, I'm sure you can tell that. But I worked in radio for a while. That's how I got into podcasting. And so editing audio, being in that medium is my comfort zone. So it's been tough for me. I'll be honest. It's been tough for me to try to be consistent with the YouTube content. But if you like it, let me know. You can tweet at me. The show is at Locked On TCU. I'm at Simcox Steven. If you're like, I really like being able to watch this as opposed to listening to it, please let me know. And the best way to let me know is to subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe to Locked On Horned Frogs, that tells me, okay, there's an appetite for this, right? So subscribe to that channel. And that tells me, hey, you want more content. And I'm trying to think of some fun things we could do during football season with it. But for right now, it's just a daily show. Anyway, you can leave me a comment at Locked On TCU, at Locked On Horned Frogs. At Locked On TCU or at Simcox Steven. Or just subscribe to the channel. And that would be an effective way to let me know, hey, this is where we're going. Okay, so I put this poll out a few days ago, and I just simply said, hey, that game 1 against Colorado, who do you think is going to be the starter? Chandler Morris or Max Duggan? And Chandler won. The results were 70% Chandler, 30% Max Duggan. Now, we still don't have a public announcement. Chandler got in a couple consecutive days of reps with the number ones, but nothing public from Sonny Dykes yet. And so a couple of you chimed in on this discussion. And one of those was Vincent Rapp, at Vince_Rapp on Twitter if you want to follow him. And he says, just my thoughts. We've seen Duggan over the last few years struggle to hit open receivers. He's a great runner, but Chandler Morris had almost a quarter of Duggan's best passing year in one game. It's time to see the QB that can air it out and hopefully stay healthy. All right, so thank you, Vincent, for your thoughts. Let me say this. I think Chandler's going to end up being the guy. If I had a vote, that's who I would vote for based on the limited information I have. And you're right. Max Duggan has struggled with his accuracy. He struggled with some of those deep throws that they've asked him to make in the past. He's got a great arm. I mean, has great arm talent. Just don't always know where the ball's going. To a certain extent, I think Max has gotten a raw deal. He's dealt with a bad offensive line. He's dealt with a play calling conundrum, I guess you could say, a clashing of offensive philosophies. At the same time, though, I agree with you for the most part. I think Chandler is a gifted passer. The one thing I'll say about Chandler is, you're right, Vincent. He did have an amazing game against Baylor. And Max is a really adept runner. And when I think about Max's best games in his career, those upsets of Texas, beating Oklahoma State at home in 2020, a lot of that damage was done with his legs. The only thing I'll say about Chandler is we do have a very small sample size, right? But I mostly agree with you. I think he is a gifted passer. He makes plays. We saw him make some plays with his feet as well in that game. And I feel like a lot of the short, intermediate throws that this offense is going to ask the quarterback to make suits what Chandler Morris did in high school and suits his game really well. We also heard from our guy Tommy, who's one of our most loyal listeners. And he's at TRF51. He said, I think they both play, but Chandler's a starter. I also think Sam plays a handful of plays, but probably not at QB. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, we talked about Sam Jackson. They're trying to find a way to get the ball in his hands. It's not necessarily at the quarterback position. They put him in the slot. They've done some creative things with him in practice, and I expect that to continue. I think he's going to play. And you do make a good point as well. However this ends, I mean, it's hard to stay healthy. And Max really hasn't been able to do it through his career. He's taken a lot of hits. Chandler Morris, I know he's been working with calves like everybody else has, and hopefully his body is in better condition. But he's kind of got a small frame. And so, yeah, there's a good chance you're going to need your backup QB. And so the downside of this quarterback competition is you don't know how the loser is going to react. You don't know how, if Max doesn't get this job and he's been a starter for 3 years, does he stick it out through the season? I mean, you would hope so. He doesn't really have anywhere to go at the moment. Does he completely buy in? I think given what we've seen from Max and his character and just who he is, I would guess that he would. But that is the risk you run when you name a starter. And, I mean, it's going to be tough. I feel for both those guys because I know they've laid it all out there on the line. And we'll see. We'll see if we get an announcement this week. We'll be back tomorrow. This is Locked On Horned Frogs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, and it's every day.